It's Monday night, and you know what that means. Jersey First TV proudly brings to you the latest edition of Real Talk. And I am New Jersey's premier award-winning Joe. And by the way, folks, I'm running out of room here in this house after learning that I'll receive another award next week at a very, very important conference hosted by a U.S. representative out of Bergen County. I'll let you figure it out who that is. But as Hispanic Heritage Month will begin in September, they'll be honoring Hispanic journalists. So, hey, why not honor one of the more premier Hispanic journalists in New Jersey? So I'm very flattered about that. Obviously, I'm running out of room in this house with all these awards, but it's nice to be liked, that's for sure. Certainly I'm the top 100 Latino via the Latino Spirit online magazine for 2020, 2021, and now in 2022. And certainly, let me get a little bilingual here for all of my Spanish folks listening tonight. Ahora llega el superestrella. That's right, it's me, Fernando Uribe. Hoping you have a wonderful week. Start of the week, ladies and gentlemen. Summer has just flown by for us here as August is just about to come to a close. And a special programming note, next Monday is Labor Day. We will not have a broadcast. I'll be in Vegas enjoying myself to close out the summer. And again, you can always check out all of the highlights and replays from all of my episodes, which generate very good traffic, by the way, by going to www.jerseyfirst.org/Real Talk with Fernando Uribe. And certainly, gentlemen, I want to thank you all for tuning in from wherever and however you may be doing so here on Facebook Live via StreamYard, on the Jersey First TV YouTube page, and also on LinkedIn. I tell you, folks, it's wonderful to be on so many different platforms. And I certainly appreciate you tuning in here. Again, sharing is caring. Keep the comments coming in the comment box here tonight. I appreciate that. My boy Pete, fellow member of Cowboy Nation there, supporting me, so I appreciate that. And without a doubt, folks, share it when you can. Make sure you like Jersey First TV on Facebook. Make sure you follow them on Instagram and Twitter. And check out my own Instagram and Twitter. It's the same handle, at the Fernando Zone. And so make sure you like me on Facebook as well. I'm the handsome guy with the Joe Biden sucks t-shirt. You can't miss me, folks. I'm extremely photogenic, so I'm easy to find on Facebook. And of course, make sure you also like Real Talk with Fernando Uribe as well. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you tune in to the end of the broadcast because I have a lot to say as to announcing the winner of the worst journalist of the week here in the state of New Jersey. I don't want to give it away too much, but yes, it involves somebody from Insider NJ. What a surprise. And certainly someone from NJ Spotlight News. So you definitely want to tune in for that. But first, ladies and gentlemen, the reason that this show does so well and continues to do well is because of two dynamics. Number one, my loyal viewing audience, my very intelligent audience, which is all of you at home, watching on any smartphone, tablet, PC, or Mac. And certainly the traffic speaks for itself, ladies and gentlemen. Not just tens of views, hundreds, but talk about thousands and thousands of views. So the traffic speaks for itself. And we talk about the greatness of this show, folks. Again, it's not like a carton of eggs. It's not like a gallon of milk. Greatness, like yours truly, never expires. And it doesn't on this program. And of course, the second dynamic is having amazing guests that are in sort of the microscope of the political scene. And this week is no exception. She is the distinguished president of the National Organization for Women here in New Jersey. She was back on in the spring, and she's back here during the summer, folks. My good friend and yours, the very honorable Anjali Mehrotra, here joining us on Real Talk. Okay, hopefully we can get her there. Hopefully, some technical difficulties here. Just bear with me, folks. Anjali, how are you? Welcome to Real Talk.
Hi, Fernando. It's great to join you again. How are you?
I'm good. It's, good, just summer flying by. I'm excited, after a nice weekend. By the way, I have to give a shout out to my Dallas Cowboys having a nice preseason. Looking forward to the NFL in just a few weeks, that's for sure. So are a lot of men and women throughout the tri-state area as well. Anjali, a lot to unpack here, certainly with what's going on in our political climate. But before we get to that, for those watching at home or just seeing you and meeting you online for the first time, really give us a breakdown of your story. It's a really, really compelling one. I mean, I'm the son of immigrants. I understand the immigrant experience of my parents, my mom leaving communism in Cuba, my dad leaving a really bad economy in Colombia, coming here, making a life for themselves, learning English, coming here legally, doing it the right way, learning English, working, instilling a great work ethic, in me, raising what I would argue is a great child in me, Anjali. But mostly, I understand the immigrant experience. I know that you certainly exemplify that with your struggles and your triumphs that you've had since coming to the U.S. So help us understand really your journey here.
So, and my journey is really what also makes me a feminist. And I always like to say that I was a feminist probably before I knew the word or that even it existed. Growing up in a country where, everything that I saw around me sort of embodied the patriarchy in terms of rules, regulations, what I was allowed to do, what kind of future there was for me. There was something in me that rebelled from a very, very young age. I'm not one of those people that I often meet feminists who sort of had this awakening moment, when like something happened or whatever, and they're like, wait a second, this is not right. Why is this happening to me? And that's when they realize that this is all part of the patriarchy. I was not one of those people. I was raised in a society that was extremely patriarchal, and nothing about it sat right with me. So when I did move to the United States, in some ways, even though we know that there are definitely, ways to go in the fight for equality for all genders in the United States, coming from India, it was very freeing because I was finally able to speak my mind. I was able to have a lot of opportunities that I could not have in India. And I initially came here to go to college, right in your backyard, actually. I went to Stevens. I ended up staying. I met my husband at, Stevens, and we both ended up staying here. We're truly the immigrant experience, as you said. We both got jobs, and that's it. We decided to raise our family here. We both came here with no family. We still don't really have any family in the United States. But this is where we raised our daughters in New Jersey. So, yeah.
Let me just ask you this, and a shout out to your husband again for, really, I appreciate his patience here. I'm sure there are things you want to do at home with him this evening, spend some time, but I appreciate you coming on here tonight. So shout out to him, obviously. But let me ask you this, because I know that in my dating life, Anjali, I've dated every type of woman, whether it be conservative, liberal, socialist, anarchist, atheist, whoever. Was that ever an issue between you and your husband, again, as during the courtship, during dating, where maybe you didn't share the same political beliefs, or maybe you do? How does the dynamic work in the household?
So, honestly, we both came here as immigrants. We both thought we were going back in 4 years. I also like to tell people that I was a Democrat before I was a citizen.
Okay.
And some of that really started at, when I was at Stevens. I came back fully expecting to go back after 4 years. Came here fully expecting to go back in 4 years, and did not really pay attention to the political landscape, how it worked or anything. And then when I was doing my master's at Stevens, I was working in an office where the professor that I worked for was truly an independent, but his son was a diehard Democrat, and we had another gentleman in the office who was a Republican. And there was a lot of very, I think, interesting intellectual debate. That was the presidential election year. I ended up listening to them a lot, learned a lot from that office, and really making up for myself, my mind, that my values probably aligned closer to that of the Democratic Party. The moment I became a citizen, actually, I remember very clearly being sworn in Newark and walking right across the street. It was the last day to register to vote for that year's presidential election. And I walked across the street to the post office, and not only did I registered as a Democrat. There was no, in my mind, any choice. And I think my husband has always felt the same way. So we, in terms of our values that we share as immigrants, we always look for inclusion and policies that are going to really build that big tent that we like to talk about in the Democratic Party. And I don't think there's really been any dispute on that.
Interesting. It seems like you got him in check there. So I don't know. When it comes to that, who knows? What election year was that, Anjali?
So that was when John Kerry was running.
Oh God, Anjali, Jesus Christ, John Kerry. Oh man,
that was a
you
while
must have
ago.
been like this pulling the lever. You were like, oh, go, I'll go, I'll go. I'm kidding. How was that experience? Obviously, the first time you voted. I mean, it was really empowering.
It was very empowering. And I think that was actually one of my reasons that I became a citizen. I know that a lot of people who live here many years with permanent residency don't actually take the next step to become a citizen. And for me, it was really important to have that right to vote, to be able to have a say in the country that I was going to live in, that I'd chosen for my family, in its government, its policies. And I took that very, very seriously, and I've never missed an election.
All right. Same here. I haven't missed an election either. I take the right to vote very sacredly because, again, being the son of a Cuban mother, and we all know what communism and socialism has done, not just in Cuba, but around the world. And so my mom also takes the right to vote very sacredly because she lost it outright. So, I mean, and certainly my dad did not, but he's also someone that takes the right to vote very, very to heart and makes a point not to miss elections. We'll talk about the Democratic Party in a moment in the sense of this is clearly not JFK's Democrat Party, okay, from 60 years ago. And, whether or not he's rolling around in his grave, we can debate that a little bit later. And we'll talk about sort of the direction of the Democratic Party. But again, folks, if you have not, checked out the National Organization for Women in New Jersey, go to their website, www.nownj.org. Plenty of resources there. Again, as I'm just looking at it now, obviously, very, very easy website to navigate, very user-friendly, whether it's about issues, programs, media, chapters, and everything else. Certainly, and again, I'm going to be a gentleman here, Anjali, okay? I'm going to be like, hey, listen, summer's coming to an end. Kids are going back to work. You might have to drop them off at the school bus stop, whatever, or you're going to work, yourself. Do me a favor. Instead of getting that extra super mega cappuccino macchiato at Starbucks in the morning, save that money, put it away for a couple of weeks. Don't get the ultra expensive coffee at Starbucks. Lay off that Danish or that breakfast sandwich. Take that little money, total it up at the end of the month, and you click the donate button on the upper right-hand corner. Again, your donation is tax deductible. It's safe and secure online. So you definitely want to, if you're interested, please donate to NOWNJ.org, and certainly goes a long way if you identify with the issues and platforms that the National Organization for Women in New Jersey identifies with. So there you go, Anjali.
So I do want to correct that because our donations to us are not tax deductible.
Oh, they're not.
We are
okay.
a 501c4.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, I stand corrected. So again, folks,
I appreciate the call out. Yep.
Hey, if you want to donate, again, it's safe and secure online. If you wish, do that. Goes a long way with helping organizations like now here in New Jersey. Anjali, obviously, you were back. You're back on this show, a repeat guest, which I tend to get a lot, especially for those that identify on the left. It seems like they like coming on the show. They like having a dialogue. They like having a discussion like cordial civil adults, which I know that you and I do and continue to do. It has been quite a volatile spring and summer since our last episode. Coincidentally, folks, if you didn't catch that, actually a really good episode, actually over 4,000 views, by the way, not to toot my own horn on the show, but really, really good traffic on that episode. And that night, Anjali, we were talking about abortion. We were talking about Roe versus Wade. And I sort of came from the perspective of like, well, it's been precedent for 50 plus years. I don't think that it's in danger of being overturned at the federal level, and worst case scenario at the state level. If it goes to the states, it's a state by state basis. I was kind of correct, I guess, partially correct with the state by state basis thing, but I was surprised to see it overturned. We know that in April the decision was leaked. I don't know how, but it was, and subsequently in June we saw the full decision being published. I think hundreds of pages. It's amazing to me how 9 grown men and women can write that much. I mean, I don't think I wrote that much in graduate school and for my dissertation, Anjali. But that's what it seems like. Certainly a lot to unpackage about Roe versus Wade overturned. Your thoughts that June afternoon when you heard the news?
So let's go back to April, as you said, when the news was first leaked, right? I mean, this is something that I think, those of us who support the right for abortion, we knew this was coming. We had seen sort of the direction of the wind that, in terms of arguments, when Dobbs was being heard. but also in general in the last few Supreme Court cases that we've had, that has really chipped away. Even though the right to abortion may have survived until now, we saw access points sort of chipping away. So I don't think any of us were wholly surprised. I think this is something that we had been gearing up for this fight. I think most of us expected it to go towards that direction, if not a full overturn, at least some kind of partial, creating of more barriers. I think in June, when the news finally came down, it was official, I think we all knew it was not a surprise at all. I will say that emotions definitely still ran high, because it's one of those things like, you see the truck coming, but when it hits you, you still feel it, right? So I think based on that, I think there's been a lot of I think it was a wake up call. I also like to say always that progress is fragile and we all need to sort of keep working, which is why I talk about the election fact that it's so important, because elections have consequences and we need turnout and we need people to really vote for their values. And we know that, everything that you've talked about states denying rights. And it's not actually, it's not a coincidence that a lot of the states that are now denying reproductive rights to women are the same states that are also denying voting rights, and they're denying, they're going after LGBTQ rights. This is an overall sort of theme, I would say, of those folks, right? So in that sense, I think there is definitely a new movement. And we are really calling for everyone to unite, to recognize that we are all united in this fight, against the same basic forces, to really have the communities that care about voting rights, that care about gay rights, that care about abortion rights, to really unite in this moment, and send a message that this is not, we're not going to allow this to happen. Like, we're going to, show up in November, keep the House, flip the Senate. That is the message that now and every organization that is fighting for this is really sending out.
All right, fair enough. Folks, it's 6:15 here on the East Coast. If you just tuned in here on Facebook Live via StreamYard, also on the Jersey First TV YouTube page, and also on LinkedIn. My guest this week is the distinguished president of the National Organization for Women here in New Jersey, Mrs. Anjali Mehrotra. I'll get that name right. I apologize, Anjali. And
the name is correct, but I do not use the title Mrs. So.
Oh, where's the husband? You know what? Whoa, is that your maiden name or is that your married name?
That's my married name, but that's my choice, and I do not believe in, my marriage does not define me.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Husband, give me a call after the show. We gotta have a talk here. No, Anjali, again, it's good to have you on the show. A lot to unpack there. Obviously, folks, keep the comments coming if you can here on StreamYard. Anjali, when we talk about elections, you're right about elections having consequences. We talk about what this midterm election means. Historically, again, being the academic in me, we know that during the first midterm, there tends to be a flipping of the House, which we've seen, obviously, on a couple of occasions. In 2002, under President George W. Bush, Republicans held the House and actually added seats. Same thing in 1934 under President FDR, where Democrats held the House and actually added seats too. Historically, we've seen the House flip during the first midterm. There seems to be at times some anxiety, some resentment, some anger against the incumbent in the White House, right? We saw that back in 2018. Democrats really mobilized, right? They had their boogeyman. They knew how to concentrate voter registration and mobilization, and they flipped the House. No surprise there. They got a little closer in flipping some Senate seats. And obviously, Republicans still feel a little confident, right, nationally. Maybe not in New Jersey, at least the north where I live, but maybe central South Jersey, which we'll get to a little bit later. But nationally, there's still some hopes that it can go red. Hopefully it does, for me at least. And we'll see the Senate. I don't think the Senate will go red. I think it will either stay 50-50 or maybe lean somewhat blue after November. But, when we talk about elections, we talk about this cycle. It seems that, there's a lot of money being thrown at elections, at campaigns. here in the Northeast and the South, Midwest, Southwest and everything about what this midterm signifies. And I understand that Roe v. Wade has empowered a lot of people on the left, Democrats, operatives, activists, to get out there and to really mobilize and say, listen, this election's about, choice and reproductive rights. And oftentimes, sometimes these elections often don't have a great turnout, right? Sometimes midterms don't have those, but maybe that could be different this year. It's not always a single issue voter, I think, that comes out. I mean, I think there's still things that are obvious here. Okay, folks, gas is still high. And this nonsense that I hear by the liberal media in New Jersey and nationally, well, gas is going down. It's been going down, for X amount of weeks for the first time and since 2005. It should have never been this high to begin with. That's number one. I mean, I love the chicanery, the semantics about stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I think all of that is true. I mean, I think kitchen table issues that we like to talk about, definitely come into play. But when your fundamental rights are under attack, we've seen, it's easy to say that there are no one issue voters. Well, we have seen on the extreme right that they have been one issue voters for all these years, right? Flipping the Supreme Court, getting rid of abortion was their one issue. Guess what? They don't have that anymore. They got it. Now it's the other side. And I will tell you that people who are fighting on the other side, we've seen this in Kansas. We've seen this in 4 special elections since the Roe decision, that all of those districts where they've had special elections, the decision has come down and the vote has turned up. And in all of them, the numbers for the Democrat have been higher than Joe Biden's number in that district versus Trump. So there is definitely energy on that side. I think there is definitely mobilization on that side. I think this is way more basic than even, gas prices and whatever else. They're coming after my rights. Let's get that clear. Those are my rights that we are talking about.
No, that's fair. But again, as you mentioned about kitchen table issues, which I'm the champion of. I'm the only journalist in New Jersey talking about kitchen table issues. Everybody else wants to virtue signal and be all woke. And we'll get to that in a minute because I really want to get your thoughts on it. But you're right. I think that, collectively we look at an election like this where, again, one specific gender feels rights are under attack. And obviously they're going to mobilize collectively. But let me ask you this, though, because I think both parties are very guilty of this. And when it comes to election time, certain topics get weaponized. It's not like when Democrats have held the Congress and the presidency that abortion couldn't have been codified years ago. Same thing with Republicans codifying certain things too. It just seems like it's a convenient football to run with in an election year where, again, it's not like, again, folks, the internet doesn't, maybe people forget. I don't, and the internet doesn't forget.
I think, to be honest with you, I think more often than not, the Democrats, and we've seen this in New Jersey, for example, right? We did codify this year, the right to abortion. How many Republicans voted for it? 0. Okay. So the reality is that this is, we started this conversation with, how I felt as an immigrant coming to the United States. And we talked about basic freedom and basic rights, right? Like I didn't feel like I had the right to even voice my opinion like this growing up in New Jersey. Here I do, it always amazes me as an immigrant when I, shortly after like Trump's election, I would see somebody like Stephen Colbert, like go up to a microphone, straight eye in the camera and call up the president of the country. Like you do not see that in a lot of the countries around the world. Not where I came from anyways,
well,
right. And so having this ability, having this voice, being able to use it, this is very fundamental to me. This is not anymore about, we can talk a lot about gas prices, taxes, all of those things. But when you are under attack for your basic freedoms, and let me tell you, when we talk about economic issues, to me, abortion is an economic issue. Because if a woman does not have the right to, make decisions about her own family, her own reproductive cycle, whether she wants to have a family or not, that holds back on opportunities on education, on career. Ultimately, it is the entire cycle that can determine her family's wealth and economic health, right? So to me, abortion foremost is an economic issue for women.
That's fair. That's a fair argument, and I don't disagree about it. What I would say, though, again, and you talked about New Jersey, certainly codifying. I know Governor Murphy, one of the more progressive governors in the country. Interesting how he's like sort of letting his hair grow. He's wearing more button-down shirts and jackets. It's like, the emperor seems to think he might be presidential material. I don't know about that. We'll get to that a little bit later. I really want to get your thoughts on that. But yes, here in New Jersey, they did codify reproductive rights. But Anjali, I've talked about this on the show with guests on the right, on the left, and everything. And maybe it's the academic in me. Maybe it's just someone who, I don't know, tries to think pragmatically or just think sort of as objectively as possible. And I get it. Here in New Jersey, abortion and the access to abortion, the right to terminate a pregnancy, I mean, hopefully earlier than sooner than later, access to Plan Bs and everything else. I mean, those are things that are very accessible here in New Jersey. Same thing across the river in New York. I understand that there's an outrage about what goes on in Tennessee or Texas or Alabama and everything else. And maybe, and again, and I try to say this as objective as possible, but immediately I get hit with the, oh, you're a misogynist. Oh, I'm like, no, I'm none of those things. I'm just thinking out loud and being objective. At the end of the day, though, Anjali, could I make the argument that I get it as a woman, you're outraged? Don't disagree with that. You have every right to be. But at the end of the day, the way I look at it is, well, listen, I get it. May not seem fair to you what's going on in Kentucky or Tennessee or Alabama or Mississippi or wherever. But again, I go back, again, as a history professor, someone who drills the Bill of Rights into my students' heads every semester. At the end of the day, states, again, pretty much what the decision held, what we suspected. It's going to go back to the states' rights, and we may not like it. You may not like it, but at the end of the day, it's like, listen, I say it all the time. Do you think people in Florida and Tennessee care that here in New Jersey that we coddle illegals, that we have the highest property taxes in the country? Of course not. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, I get it. We may not like what they're doing. They don't like what we're doing. They don't care. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, for me, it's like, hey, it may not seem right, but that's their right as a state to do so. I mean,
so again, I would go back to this is way too fundamental. Like, to me, what we're creating right now in the country is very similar to a sort of a two-state situation that we had before the Civil War, when we had slave states and we had free states. So to have states that will give rights to people, and we have states that will take away rights. And so we're already living in a world where, I have two young daughters, right? And as they advance in their journey, whether they're past undergraduate, but they are going to go to graduate school someday, they're going to have careers where you would hope that they would be able to travel freely throughout this country and live wherever they want. However, at every point in their career, every point in their life going forward, if this continues, they're going to have to make the decision based on, do I want to live in a state that was going to take away my rights, right? So we're already creating that situation. I already have parents that have young children that are just starting to apply to college, that are thinking about which college do I want to apply to and where do I want to go? Do I really want to go to Texas or Mississippi or Florida where I am not going to have rights? What if my daughter actually gets pregnant in one of those states? What am I going to do then? So this is already creating that situation. We are already seeing companies call this out. We are seeing companies leave states or at least make decisions based on this, saying that we're not going to expand in those states where these rights are being curtailed. So this is at every level a decision, I think, that is going to have far-reaching consequences in terms of economics, really economics. And it's going to be economics that influence people's career decisions, their opportunities for education, companies where they'll do business, where they don't. So this is not just a matter of whether I like it or not, and what happens in Kansas, as we just saw, does actually affect people in New Jersey. It does affect the ability of us to be united as the United States and to think of this as one country where, everyone should have equal opportunity and be able to move freely and travel freely without consequences on, we're talking about even the freedom to love the person that you want to love now. There are states that want to curtail that.
Well, Anjali, to be fair, and because I had the president of the LGBTQ Dems last week on the show, and I've also dissected some articles. Unlike the recent decision that overturned abortion, I've made a point to do homework on this, and there is not one court docket on any calendar in any state right now, and I know this for a fact, that that is looking to contest the Obergefell decision from 2015. Now, again, there's nothing on the dockets whatsoever. You would think that if there is some outrage about same-sex marriage, which again, I'm all for. I mean, hey, you know what? I say it all the time. I was once married. Hey, you know what? Gay people have the right to be as miserable as the rest of us heterosexuals being married, okay? So God bless you. I have no problems with that. I believe in the rights that go with being married, obviously for medical decisions and everything else. I don't have a problem with same-sex marriage. That's fine. It's been codified. It's been decided by the Supreme Court. But at the state level, again, there's no court decision anywhere in the peripheral future that's looking to contest this. So I just think sometimes this becomes weaponized.
One of the things so it has not been codified. It is similar to Roe. It is actually a Supreme Court decision that made marriage equality the law of the land. It is not in statute. Okay. So that's number one. Number two, it's okay to say that, but we saw what happened with Roe, and we saw the Roe was not something that happened overnight, right?
Yeah,
it was
years though.
It took years to build that, right? And yet at the same time, when they put Roe down and they, in those court, documents that you talked about that like super long, they actually called for overturning marriage equality. This is the same Supreme Court that we have right now. The 9 justices that are sitting right now have sent out a clarion call. Believe me, those people are listening, to the activists on the other side that we may be open to do this. And we have heard calls from GOP senators, legislators at the federal level to say that, yes, we're looking at this. So I don't think it's unreasonable to think that this is something that the sort of the extreme right is organizing around. And I don't think that it is, something. I mean, I think every gay person, every person who supports LGBTQ rights should be worried about this. They should be concerned about this. They should be thinking about what, may be planned as, again, an attack against them. For long, and, Fernando, you said it yourself. You said Roe wouldn't fall. It wouldn't happen.
Well, I mean, again,
I
mean, listen, I'm not that lucky. Obviously, I didn't win the Powerball lately. So, I mean, obviously, I can't call things that closely. But to your point, listen, I understand the concern maybe on a state level. But like I mentioned before, I mean, and this is something, too, because as a conservative, I get mad at Republicans when they control both chambers of Congress and they control the presidency. There's certain things I wish that they would codify or whatever. I mean, I think that there's also this collective lack of anger by people who lean Democrat, that should be levied against Democrats. There have been numerous cycles, Anjali, that Democrats have controlled Congress and the presidency, and they've never, for whatever reason, have gone to codify, for example, abortion nationally. When they've had, listen, folks, here's a history lesson. In 2009, Democrats had 60 votes in the Senate, and they controlled the House by an overwhelming number, and had a Democrat in the White House. And never once did that even come to a vote. So I think both sides, to be fair, Anjali, can be accused of dropping the ball when they have majorities in their favor to make certain legislation. I mean, again, just look at 2009. I mean, 60 votes in the Senate, overwhelming majority in the House, and not once did it occur to codify abortion nationally. I think both sides are guilty of dropping the ball if they want to get things done. Is that fair to say?
I mean, I think it goes back to the fact that, none of us has a crystal ball, right? I mean, and in 2009, I think we're sitting here again. I want to point out in 2022, you told me Roe would not fall. So to say that in 2009, they could have anticipated this moment and taken action.
Anjali, I'll let you finish. I'm sorry. But I mean, isn't this something that gets weaponized every election cycle? Both sides weaponize.
I don't think it's about a weaponization. Fernando, we're talking about basic rights. And I want to really make it very clear that this is not just about reproductive rights. This is about, again, I said, LGBTQ rights. I mean, we have states here that are, absolutely going after voting rights. Like, they really want to suppress the right to vote. And it's just not a coincidence. The reality is that this country, when you talk to young people in this country, right, this country is definitely getting more and more progressive every day. And this is the GOP and the conservatives.
Pockets.
Well, I would say if you talk to young people in the Midwest, I don't care where they are more likely to be in favor of LGBTQ rights, to be in favor of reproductive rights for women than their previous generations were, right? And so this is the conservative right trying to hold on to their power in every way that they can. And that's what the voting rights and the suppression is about.
Well, let's talk about voting
the
rights.
reality is that the numbers don't hold for them, as we keep seeing, and that's really also reflected in our popular votes, right? Our popular vote numbers have leaned Democratic for years. And that's just the truth of where this country is headed. And I think it's...
Well, let's talk. And folks, it's 6:35 here on the East Coast. Keep the comments coming. Thank you for joining us here on Facebook Live via StreamYard, also on the Jersey First YouTube page, also on LinkedIn. And if you're just joining us here live with me tonight is the distinguished president of the National Organization for Women here in New Jersey, the very honorable and very, very lively, to say the least, always on this show, a great guest, Miss Anjali Mehrotra here on the show. Anjali, let's talk about voting rights. You bring it up, and I'm someone that, again, I look at voting and I understand it's a right that's written into the most glorious document that's ever been written in the history of civilization, probably next to the Magna Carta. Okay. And we understand about what voting represents. But when we talk about voting and, the notion, here's a simple example. I'm someone that's all in favor of voter ID. And the reason I'm in for it is, again, let's just take New Jersey, for example. It's a heavily Democrat legislature, not as heavily Democrat as it was last year. It's sort of Republicans are chipping away, thankfully, and we'll see what happens next year in 23. But, here in New Jersey, if you want to get an ID, for example, okay, and again, and I say this all the time, if you prioritize voting, folks, and let's say you need to present an ID when you go vote, which I don't think is unreasonable, okay, if you operate a motor vehicle, it costs you $24 to renew your motor vehicle license every 4 years. I believe it's 24. Okay. So within those 4 years, that's 48 months. If you can't put $2 away every month to get your license renewed, or even if you don't operate a motor vehicle, that's even less. That's, I think, $20. If folks cannot prioritize and find a way to get $20 in 4 years to get their ID, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I don't mean you, Anjali. I mean generically people out there. Then you don't prioritize voting. Getting an ID is nothing.
I don't think anybody should have to pay to vote. I don't think any country does that. If you wanted to actually have voter ID cards, there are countries that have it. I mean, India is one of those countries that actually has voter ID cards, and you know how they do it in India? The government pays for it. They're free.
Well, Anjali, but taxpayers pay for it, not government taxpayers.
Well, whatever. But it is not individuals who cannot afford it or whatever. And not only that, those people come to register you at your house to issue those cards. They go from neighborhood to neighborhood, much like our census, counters do, right? To register voters and give them their voter ID cards. It is not something that creates a barrier for people. It is not something that creates a burden on people where they have to travel or go to an office, make an appointment, whatever, to get an ID. It always actually amazes me. This is not just about voter IDs. I mean, there are so many things in this country that, when we enter a government building or all of these different things, that we are asked to produce some kind of ID, right? And the fact that the government does not actually issue IDs for free, but request them for entry into buildings and things like that, I think is, frankly, it's a unfunded mandate, sort of, right?
No, Anjali, you're right. And that's a fair argument. But again, here in New Jersey, I'll give the example again. God knows the legislature wastes money on a lot of pet projects that I can name. I don't have enough fingers and toes to name them. But you know what? Why don't Democrats in Trenton do that? They have the majority in the legislature. They have a Democrat governor. It's easy. Hey, we'll pay for it. I mean, obviously, they'll spend money on a lot of other things. I don't understand why Democrats in Trenton, again, it just seems like this is something they want to weaponize and use as a rallying cry. Hey, if they want to spend money on government ID, they could do it tomorrow for whatever reason.
Oh, by the way, did you know that in New Jersey, the first time you vote, you do have to show ID?
But that's a good thing. Shouldn't you want to verify who you are when you vote?
Once the verification is done, I mean, we still sign, right? Like our signature should act as an ID, right?
Anjali, I mean, how many times did I forge my parents' signature on my report card when I was a kid? I mean, come on now. I mean, really? Are we going to use that argument here? Really?
So, I mean, in that same argument,
Sorry,
like,
Mom and
what is
Dad,
going
I'm
to
sorry
prevent
to tell
somebody
you
from
that.
getting a fake ID? I mean, like, I mean, now we're talking about, dishonesty and fraud. And I mean, that's not, I think, where we want this conversation to go.
Sure, but
Right.
okay.
But the
Sorry, Mom and
reality
Dad.
is just,
Sorry, Mom and Dad. I know years later, I know I'm just admitting this now. Sorry, but I'm sure they'll forgive me. I'm sorry, Anjali. Continue.
so, again, I really, and I'm a big believer in that no one should have to pay to vote, right? That is something that I think as a country, as a nation, it should be honestly, the duty of every citizen, but at the same time, it is upon the government to make it as accessible and easy as possible for people to vote. Like, I would be hugely in support of a federal holiday. Like, there is no reason why we should not have a federal holiday.
Same here.
I'm
with that. Mm-hmm.
Because I think we really should make it easier. But we're not just talking about voter ID. When you say that you can't give water to people standing in line to vote, that's just voter suppression.
Anjali, at the end of the day, I mean, come on. I mean, you're going
really?
to vote. Well, Anjali, again,
you can't give them water?
Well, Anjali, I'm someone that, listen, I take the right to vote sacredly. If I'm going to go somewhere, I don't know. I'm just a very self-sustaining person. I don't expect handouts from anybody. I just expect, hey, I'm going to go vote. If I got something in my hand, chewing gum or whatever, that's on me. Like, at the end of the day, I think that this becomes, I think, a lot of the language, I think, that goes into voting rights or voter suppression or the clash about voting is how we conceptualize it, how we look at it, let's say state to state or whatever. To your point about, hey, government should provide ID, I don't disagree. That's fine. I mean, obviously, we're going to pay for it. It's through taxpayer dollars. I'm with you. But the idea that, whether it's your motor vehicle license or just an ID from the NBC, forget about COVID and all the troubles it created for the NBC. Even before that, like, I'm a very sort of self-sustaining person. Like, it's up to you folks. If you can't afford $24 in 4 years, there's a problem. There's a serious problem. You cannot put away $24 to get a license or to get an ID if you don't operate a vehicle. Anjali, come on. If you can't afford $24 in 4 years, Mike, I mean, come on.
Really? I don't think it's an affordability issue for a lot of people. There's lots of barriers. I have to take time off from work maybe to get that appointment to get the ID. There are a lot of different reasons why people may not have that ID. If I'm not operating a vehicle, if I have no reason to need an ID, we're not making it easier for certain, so I just don't think that there should be any kind of payment attached to voting. I think it sends a very wrong message as a nation where you're asking people to pay the government to vote.
But do you like the notion of voter ID, like the ability to present an ID and verify who you are when you go vote? Is that something you're on board with?
We're already doing that. And okay. I mean, we're already doing that, frankly, but.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Let's switch to the midterms here coming up. Again, obviously, we're a couple months away. Where I live in Hudson County, it's as blue as the ocean. So U.S. Representative Albio Ceres stepping down, retiring. The son of senior United States Senator Robert Menendez Sr., his son Robert Jr., won the primary. He's going to easily win coming up on November the 8th. Just to the north of me in Bergen County, it seems very, very likely that Josh Gottheimer, the U.S. representative there in Bergen County in that district, is going to win pretty easily. To the west of him, Bill Pascrell, sort of who I would call the poster boy of a career politician, but has a good machine going, has a good mobilization apparatus. Most likely he's going to win very easily. But races west of him in Central and South Jersey are a little more competitive. And I would argue that in 2018, yeah, it was easy, Anjali. You had the boogeyman, you had the 45th president there, which was easy to rally against. Now Tom Malinowski, Andy Kim, and others, you have to kind of win an election on your own. It's not like you want to bring Joe Biden to New Jersey and have him campaign with you. I don't believe this nonsense on MSNBC and CNN and this approval rating. It's still relatively low. I think they're going to have to win races on their own without, again, there's no boogeyman to go after. They're going to have to win it on their own. And some of them may not want to bring the president to New Jersey, and I don't blame them. There's not a lot to run on. So do you see Democrats even being able to keep those competitive seats in Central and South Jersey?
I would say, of all of those seats, I would say there's a very good chance that we keep all of them. I mean, the candidates that you mentioned, Representative Cheryl, Kim,
Yeah.
Malinowski, those are all actually endorsed by a PAC. We have a federal PAC at the national level that does endorsements for federal candidates, and they are endorsed by the NOW PAC. And the reason I say that is because, again, we go back to, the energy. What happened in 2018 in New Jersey was amazing. We flipped, I believe that year it was 4 seats.
Yeah.
And, the anger, I would not say it was the boogeyman. I think there was a voter turnout issue in 2016. Everybody thought that Clinton was going to win. My vote doesn't count. And I think that message is lost now because at this point, everyone knows that elections have consequences. They've seen that in 2016, they've seen it in 2018, they've seen it in 2020, and they are ready to vote again. They are, the energy in New Jersey specifically, I think, was driven by women in 2018. We saw all of these groups across the state. Whether it's NJ11 for Change, locally where I live, there was groups like Westfield 2020, and all the indivisible groups that sprung up. And if you go to any of these meetings, you will see that the majority of them are actually suburban women, and they are upset about losing their rights. And our members, now as members, we are seeing something unprecedented in American history, to have rights, to have been given hard fought rights that we thought we were making progress taken away from us. And we're not going away quietly. I think all of these people are mobilizing. All of these people are making sure that their friends get out and vote. We saw that in Kansas. We saw that in the 19th district in New York, and we are, frankly, like we like to say, mad as hell, and we're not going away,
Okay.
So I think there is definitely that mobilization, as you've been talking about before. I think we have that energy, and I think we're going to see all of those seats stay the way they are.
All right. It certainly a lot remains. A few weeks from now, obviously, it'll be very interesting. Next 8 weeks, ultimately leading up to Election Day, as we see whether it's about reproductive rights, whether it's about gas prices, kitchen table issues, groceries, what can we afford? What can we not afford? Things of that nature. I'm sure, obviously, as we see debates between candidates, both in the House and in the United States Senate, in these next few weeks, it'll be very interesting all around, not just New Jersey, but certainly around the country as candidates are out there knocking on doors and generating messages.
And I do want to say, when you talk about affordability, like you talk about gas prices, let's talk about college education. Let's talk about drug prices. We know which side is working to lower those, right? I know frankly, I'm very fortunate that, my husband has good health insurance. We've never really had to struggle for that. But I can tell you my monthly prices for drug prices are ridiculous because, and there are so many of mine that, my insurance won't even cover. Like they want me to pay on my own. I have glaucoma and my insurance refused to cover my glaucoma medication. It's ridiculous. So, I think we need to recognize that it is not just the issues that make the talking points on the media, because they need something to balance sort of the road decision. So let's talk about gas prices. The reality is that if, Americans are struggling with providing education for their students, they're providing healthcare for themselves, for their families. And every legislation, every piece of legislation that helps on any one of those, right? So if I don't have to pay for my drugs anymore, right, I can put that towards gas. So every piece of legislation, and gas prices are not something that are frankly controlled by a legislature, right? That is a market thing. But there are places where obviously they can help, and they are doing that.
Though, Anjali, to be fair, if when you're the president of the United States and you want to cater to the Green New Deal crowd, you want to stop drilling domestically because you're more concerned with the platypus and whatever up in
I
Alaska.
don't want to talk about the platypus. We're talking about, anyone remember Superstorm Sandy? That's what we're talking about. If we don't think that climate affects us in New Jersey, our beaches, our infrastructure, You live in Hudson County, those floodings in, the Hoboken train station,
Sure.
all of those things, like that's what we're talking about when we're talking about greenhouse gases and emission. We need to understand this is about resilience of our planet, about our infrastructure being attacked on every front. This
Sure.
is not, there are parts of this world where we have food crisis. We have, extreme heat. This year we've seen in New Jersey itself, very low rainfall. These are things that are, playing out sort of on the excesses of, the past, right? When we did not recognize the harm that we were doing to our own atmosphere and our planet. And all we're trying to do is sort of fix that and make sure that we have a planet to save for our future generations.
Well, listen, I don't disagree about taking care of the planet. It's our one and only, absolutely. But I think like anything else during an election cycle, right, we hear about, well, the president has certain energy policies that cater to one side or the other, right? Whether it's about, you want to get away from fossil fuels, fine. My argument as an academic is, well, here are the facts. The MSRP on an electric vehicle on average is almost $50,000. A lot of black and brown people, working class people, working poor, you need to finance that vehicle. And guess what? A lot of black and brown people don't always have the best credit ratings or the capital to finance a vehicle like that. And that's not me being malicious. Those are just numbers and facts,
Right. But, government also can help that by building better public transport. I mean, again, I come from a country where people don't have cars. Like they use trains and buses and right. Like there are other ways to do that.
No, that's right. And listen, I one of the few times I'll applaud the emperor here. He's trying to get on New Jersey Transit to improve the system. I agree. Where I live in Hudson County, I mean, mass transit is very accessible. I can jump on a light rail and be in Hoboken in about 8 or 9 minutes. I can take one of those very unsanitary vans on Boulevard East where I feel I need a tetanus shot just to get into Port Authority, but they're accessible. When you live in South Jersey, Central Jersey, Southwest, Northwest, yeah, trains aren't always accessible. Light rails aren't being built. I get that. So I'm with you on mass transit. I think there needs to be a big overhaul in Trenton with New Jersey Transit, make it more accessible and make it affordable. I'm with you on that. Before I let you go again, folks, it's 6:50 here. I know that you've been an absolute peach here tonight after a long day, Anjali, to come on. We got a couple more things here before we close out here. Folks, if you're just joining us live here on Real Talk via Jersey First TV, she is the president of Now here in New Jersey, the National Organization for Women. Anjali Mehrotra joined us here on Real Talk. Anjali, you identify as a Democrat. I would argue that certainly somewhere in his grave, John F. Kennedy is probably rolling around saying, what in the world has happened to my Democrat Party? Because 60 years later, there are segments of the Democrat, just like the Republican Party too. I think there's equal culpability in both. But, Democrats Democrats control the media in the sense of, people who identify on the left. They control all of our institutions, whether it be entertainment, academia, whatever. And it just seems like where I live in Hudson County, for example, again, here in Hudson County, Rob Menendez Jr., very much like his father, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Pragmatic, middle of the road, yeah, center left. But, here in Hudson County, that candidate works. A pragmatic, blue-collar, working-class Democrat. Across the river, we have the Puerto Rican princess, AOC, that works in that district. I don't know how, but it does. Same thing in Massachusetts with Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, whatever. Those candidates work in those districts. Someone like Rob Menendez doesn't identify as someone who's woke and someone who, again, kitchen table issues, not pronouns. I don't give I'm unapologetic about it. I could give 2 drops of piss about pronouns and bathrooms because at the end of the day, what matters to kitchen table issues is people feeding your families. What are you going to do? Feed your family or pay that tuition bill or pay this bill or pay that bill? These are the blue collar, roll up your sleeve, kitchen table issues that matter. Again, I'm not trying to sound insensitive because I'm not, but at the end of the day,
well, I'm going to tell you, Fernando, you're starting to sound a little bit on the misogynist side because I will point out, I will say that Rob Menendez Jr. is just as progressive as an AOC or a.
No, he's not.
He really is. I mean, I've had conversations with him and he cares about those issues just as much as they do. He may not speak out about them. But to, once again, to call out women, specifically women of color, young women of color, the 2 names you mentioned, Ayanna Pressley, AOC, it is very misogynistic. I mean, these are women that won elections in their district handily, based on their issues, their values, and they represent their constituents well. And I think that's what we ask for from any of our representatives, right? And I really would want to end on the note that, again, young people in this country, care about these issues. I have young daughters. I have learned more about these issues, I would say, from them than I have from my own upbringing, my own experiences, right? These are issues that they really care about inclusion, about fairness, about equity. And that's what we're talking about. I want to be on that side of history where we build a more equitable future for everyone. It's not just for, people who look like me, for everyone. Anyone who wants to this, we both know we came to this country, or our parents did, for opportunity, for that sort of beacon of freedom, right? And that is what that country stands for. Unfortunately, has not always lived up to it.
Sure.
But as we say, we always want a sort of better, I think we sort of hold ourselves as that beacon in the world, right? And we hold ourselves up to that value. And I just want this country to really keep realizing that dream.
I'm curious, again, when you mentioned that maybe some things sound misogynist, I mean, I dislike Bernie Sanders, a white old male, for the exact same reasons I dislike AOC. They're socialists that don't understand.
But that's not the name that you mentioned, right? So it's about conversation. When you're having conversation, what are the things that first come to your mind, right? Mm-hmm. I will tell you, there have been several times when you bring up my husband. I mean, here I am today representing myself and my organization. My husband has nothing to do with this interview at all. And there have been several times that you have mentioned him. I mean, I don't bring up people in your personal life or whatever. The fact that you even found the need to bring up my husband in any context at all, right?
Well,
why?
Politics or about just, I mean,
or like anything.
Okay.
I'm not here to represent my family. I'm not here to talk about my marriage, but you have called him out several times in this conversation. And to me, that speaks of the patriarchy. That is indicative of the fact that you think somehow he has, decision-making or control on me, or that I control him. Our relationship, whatever it is not part of this conversation.
Okay. I simply brought it up in jest. I mean, again, I've dated feminists, so I know what it's like, and I understand, that, I understand the challenges of it. I've lived it a lot. As a matter of fact, I see the dynamic with my parents. They're immigrants as well, and I think that my parents, as they're approaching 50 years married.
I understand, but I'm not here to talk about my relationships or my marriage, right?
All right, that's fine. I mean, again, it was done in jest, but again, it's just humor, Anjali. But okay, fair enough. Now, again, as we're closing out here, we're looking at the future, obviously, as the midterms come, and even into 23, we see legislative elections. Obviously, past this year, how intent is now New Jersey really in pushing candidates for the legislature next year, which again, as we know that, Democrats in New Jersey have 1.5 million registration advantage. New Jersey's been solidly blue in the legislature for over 20 years. That's not going to change. Okay. We've had Republican governors, Democrat governors, that'll flip flop. It happens. But again, Democrats mobilize well. They're able to register, I guess, much more effectively. And Democrats are going to control the legislature for the foreseeable future. That's not going to change. I mean, I think that's something I would bet one of my Cowboys jerseys on and burn them right in front of my house. But when we talk about legislative races next year, what are the type of candidates now is looking to push? Obviously, aside from the incumbents, but other races that maybe are competitive.
I think now we really talk about our values. Again, we talk about, supporting women, working families. And, you'll be surprised to know that in the past, we are not a partisan organization. We are nonpartisan. We are a political organization, and we look for people that are going to support our values. So whether it be reproductive rights, reproductive justice, and that's a whole host of things like, things like maternal health. And it's not, I don't think some of these issues, like one of the issues that I work on a lot is menstruation equity. And I don't think that's a partisan issue either. So it's really about the candidates that support our issues, that will work with us to pass legislation. I think, unfortunately, we're in a moment right now where I do believe that there are Republicans out there that would like to work with us, would like to support our issues, that are probably pro-choice and abortion, but are afraid to even vote that way based on their constituency and that message that it sends. And in the past, we are actually an organization that has endorsed on both sides of the aisle. We endorsed Governor, Whitman when she ran. So we are primarily a women's organization, as you know, even though we do support all. We're inclusive of really the entire spectrum of the LGBTQ community. But so we support candidates who will support our issues. And again, as you pointed out before, you want to learn about our issues, I would invite you to come to our website. We have 6 core issues that we really, really uphold as our tenets, and that's what we're looking for in candidates. We ask them to sign a pledge that they will work towards all of those issues, things like ending violence against women or any kind of gender-based violence, because we know that our trans community faces horrific violence across the country. And those, so unfortunately, it has become harder and harder to find somebody who is not a Democrat or an independent who will support those issues. And that's just, I think, a sign of the times we live in.
Well, coincidentally, in 2011, now New Jersey endorsed me for state assembly. So go figure, obviously they nominate everybody. They endorse everybody, excuse me. Anjali, you mentioned partisanship and political. It seems like, it's hard to be partisan without being political because they kind of go hand in hand. I mean, ideology, views, not necessarily party identification, but value system. I mean, I'm partisan because I'm a conservative, but it's because of certain political views. Isn't that fair to say?
I think it depends on the candidates, right? I mean, to me, partisan means of a specific party, and we are about issues. Yeah. Okay. We are issue driven. We are not party driven. We are not tied to a party. We are not a political arm of a party. We care about our issues, and we care about candidates that care about our issues. And we do this when we're lobbying, right? We will work with legislators to support certain bills. We have worked on bills that are not as controversial. So when it comes to things like pay transparency or, removing price discrimination based on gender, I don't think those are as controversial. And we've had, both legislators on both sides of the aisle support our bills. I think that's.
What does that mean, price discrimination? Like, real quick, if you just give our audience an example.
I'll give you an example. And the most common one I would say is in a salon. Often you walk into a salon and there will be, here's a price for a men's haircut and here's a price for a woman's haircut. It's not based on length of hair. It's not based on how much time it takes the haircutter. It's just based on gender, right? And most often you will find that the men's haircuts are cheaper. And that is...
I mean, in fairness, I cut my own hair. I have the barber's tools. I cut my own hair. I style it and everything, but I also cut other people's hair in my family. But again, I'm trying to understand the notion of, doesn't it seem perhaps a little more laborious to cut and style and color perhaps, or women's hair?
Well, those are separate prices, right? There's a separate price for styling. There's a separate price for color. But when we're talking about just a price for cut, right? And it's just based on whether it's a men's or a women's, then that is price discrimination.
Okay. How can we fix that then? I mean, theoretically.
So ideally, the price list should just have that, basically a cut, regardless of what the gender of the person is, the client. It could be based on how long it takes, based on length of hair, volume of hair. I have very fine hair, so it takes like no time to cut my hair, right? Versus somebody else with the same length of hair who has a lot more hair, it will take longer. So if price is based on the actual labor, that would be fair. But when it's just based on the gender of the client, then that's discrimination.
I mean, is that like a private sector issue though, in the sense of like, do you want government theoretically, like just telling some segment of the private sector saying like, well, no, like this is what it needs to be. I mean, based on.
Well, I think the way the bill was written, they cannot advertise prices based on gender. Yes.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I was not aware of that. All right. It's something you always learn here on this program, folks, because of our great guests. You learn something new every week and multiple things every week. Anjali, before I let you go, certainly I appreciate your time here tonight. I know you've had a long day, and certainly I think we've had a very lively and very diverse conversation, a wide range of issues here. Again, being an election year, I appreciate your time. You're always a great guest. Look forward to having you on later this winter. After the elections. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'll shoot you an email. Maybe we'll make a little wager as to what chamber flips or what doesn't. We'll see. Obviously there's a lot to go. Maybe we can have a friendly wager there as well before the election comes around in November. Folks, again, make sure you always do check out www.nownj.org. Upper right-hand corner, you do see the donate button there. As we're getting back from summer, sending the kids to school. And hey, you know what? Instead of getting that super mega duper cappuccino macchiato at Starbucks and that 27th breakfast sandwich, which you probably don't need, folks. All right, guess what? Save that little money and put it, towards whatever fund you want to. Click on the donate button. Your online donation is safe and secure, and it goes a long way in helping the National Organization for Women in New Jersey, certainly with what they're doing in advocating for women's rights, whether it's reproductive issues, pay equity, pay disparities, things of that nature, things that are important to you, folks. Again, donate accordingly at www.nownj.org. Make sure you like them on Facebook. Of course, follow them on Twitter. I think also on Instagram as well. Anjali, you've been great. I appreciate you coming on. I look forward to having you come on later this fall and / winter. We'll have more lively discussions here. I'll give you the last word here on Real Talk.
I'm just going to remind everybody that this is a really, really important election year. We say this often, unfortunately, but I think this really is true, that it may be the most important election of our lifetime. We really, as I've said before, we really do think that this is a time when a lot of our basic freedoms are under attack. And I think it's really important that everybody show up to vote. So go vote.
All right. Fair enough. Folks, she is the distinguished president of the National Organization for Women here in New Jersey, Ms. Anjali Mehrotra, here joining us. And Anjali, have a great Labor Day weekend. Enjoy what's left of the summer. Stay cool. Stay hydrated, obviously, for everyone else in your family. Enjoy. And we'll talk to you again soon here on Real Talk via Jersey First TV. God bless you and take care.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Folks, good episode here tonight, again, with Anjali Mehrotra, the president of the National Organization for Women here in New Jersey. Lively conversation for sure. Folks, if you're just joining us now here live on Jersey First TV via YouTube, also on Facebook Live, via StreamYard, and also on LinkedIn, you definitely want to sharing is caring. Still got a lot to go here. Always make sure you like Jersey First on Facebook and follow them, of course, on Instagram and Twitter. Folks, we've come to that part of the program where yours truly, again, I'm the hero that you need right now as we live in a time where the liberal cesspool of media continues to permeate, not just in New Jersey, but also nationally, but more so here in the Garden State. And I do bring you now this week's winner of the worst journalist in New Jersey. And let's start off with someone who has not been on the show in a while. And yes, as we all know, he does represent NJ Spotlight News. And, folks, I like to watch NJ Spotlight News every now and then. I mean, there's some informative programming, some nice people to look at for sure during the broadcast. And I don't care how that sounds. I mean, I'm a man. I'm a straight male. I have eyes, and, we watch stuff that we like, But, again, certainly we talk about what NJ Spotlight News does a lot. And what they do is they enable clowns. Okay, very simple. They enable clowns within that network. And it's a shame because this is a channel, right, as it transitioned from being NJTV, right, where you look at a guy like Michael Aaron, who I would argue with anyone, is on the Mount Rushmore of New Jersey journalism. I would argue the GOAT, the greatest of all time when it comes to New Jersey journalism, okay? And to go from Michael Aaron to some of the clowns from NJTV and then transitioning to NJ Spotlight News, it's been unbelievable. So it made me think, I'm like, should I look at the NJ Spotlight News website and check out maybe the team photo of the staff and everything else? And it made me wonder, like, what should I look at? Am I looking at this? Oh, well, sometimes, oh, that's a mistake there. Well, not really. If you watch some of the stuff on NJ Spotlight News, this team photo behind me doesn't seem too different than what we're subjected to when it comes to NJ Spotlight News. But of course, folks, when we talk about the biggest clown in NJ Spotlight News, of course, we're talking about Uncle Dave. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Uncle Dave, David Cruz, the guy that, is interesting because he doesn't even try to hide his bias anymore. And this is what's really, really funny, looking at David Cruz, who's a guy that, I get it, he's perpetually a wreck right now because his New York Mets are finally relevant for the first time in my adult life. I don't know. I think I was like such a small child the last time the Mets won a World Series. But again, let me not digress. What's interesting about David Cruz is this propensity to just be blatantly biased. Now, I get it, Dave. You might say, well, look at the pot calling the kettle black. Understand, Dave, that I'm an opinion journalist. I'm going to have opinions. But you, on the other hand, again, you rolled up your sleeves, right? You worked in Hudson County. You work with great or even better journalists than yourself, like Al Sullivan, who I would argue is the GOAT of Hudson County journalism. So shout out to Al Sullivan, my fellow Union City resident. Love you, Al, for all of the wisdom and just tutoring you gave me to help make me the great journalist that I am today. But Dave, along the way, I think you've lost your way. Okay, because now you wear your bias on your sleeves. Okay, and I happen to just see it on my Twitter feed, right, where I happen to look at, what's posted. And of course, Uncle Dave has the audacity to post this on his Twitter feed. I'll read it to you again if you can't, folks, if you can't tune into the photo here, but I'll read it to you so you can understand how just it's so ridiculous when it comes to this, right? So Uncle Dave decided, I guess, was watching some program over the weekend, right? Ted Cruz, Rafael Cruz, I prefer to call him Rafael. That's what's on his birth certificate. Talking about a quote: "If you are the slacker barista who wasted 7 years in college, if you can get off the bong for a minute, it could drive up turnout." Well, yeah, Dave, I think that's more done in humor. If you watch Rafael Cruz's podcast with regularity, yeah, he's being funny. He's being a little condescending and sarcastic. What, you don't watch Bill Maher? You don't watch Gutfeld? Well, I doubt you watch Gutfeld, but you get what I'm saying. Maybe he's saying that in jest. But then for you, Dave, in your usual clown behavior, to write, "This is just a hateful string of cliches strung together by a man," yes, a U.S. senator, "who often displays the brains of an ass. No offense to asses and or donkeys. The, quote, voting station, quote, get off the bong, quote, slacker barista. Who are you even talking about, man? This is really funny." You think that's hateful, Dave? The fact that we have thousands of not just New Jerseyans, but even Americans nationally that picked a garbage major like gender studies or, I don't know, poetry or Western dance, and now are pleading to have their loans forgiven. Listen, I went to school. I went to graduate school, got multiple graduate degrees. And yes, I'm thankful that my loans have been frozen because of COVID, but it's my responsibility. And I decided to pick majors and go after curriculum that would help me get a job in a career that I find fulfilling: education, subsequently also journalism. Okay? But if Rafael Cruz wants to be critical about the fact that, hey, complete loan forgiveness is passing the burden on the taxpayers, why aren't you talking about that, Dave? Oh, but again, that requires Uncle Dave to have integrity. That pesky four-syllable word that David Cruz struggles with. To write something like this, a hateful string. You know what's funny? And then, of course, I had to respond to him and write the following, again, which is really interesting because, again, this is where David Cruz is myopic and he completely loses the audience. "It's rich of you," I wrote to him, "it's rich of you to ridicule Cruz when you give Booker a pass on multiple instances when he puts his foot in his mouth. Kavanaugh hearings in 2018, question mark. Really, bro? Question mark. Your memory is that faulty? Come on, man. Once again, your bias is blatantly obvious, but what else is new with you?" Dave, again, this is what makes you a clown. Because did you ever once criticize Spartacus? Remember Cory Booker and that embarrassing display he put on during the Kavanaugh hearings? Or even when Judge Jackson was being, during the confirmation hearings? I mean, this was Cory Booker during the confirmation hearings. This is all he did with Judge Jackson. And I get it, whatever he wants to, virtue signal, which Cory Booker is really good at. But don't enable him, Dave. And that's what you do. You want to go after Ted Cruz, the better Cruz, in my opinion. Again, folks, this is a constitutional scholar, graduated the top of his class at Harvard Law School. Again, I think the closest that Uncle Dave gets to Harvard Law School is maybe walking by because he's looking to get a sandwich, maybe down the block at the cafe, at the student center, or whatever. That's the closest he'll get to it. But Dave, have a little more perspective here. Okay? I get it. You want to disagree with Rafael Cruz. That's fine. But be consistent. Be consistent in your outrage. Okay? There's nothing hateful about what he said. But you want to take it that way because instead of bitching and moaning about this, why don't you write a column about how this loan forgiveness or the up to $10,000 is simply passing that bill on to taxpayers? It's simply passing the bill on to people that maybe already paid their loans or people that maybe didn't go to college and maybe sought out a trade. Okay? That burden is being passed on to them. But you won't talk about that, Dave, because you would rather virtue signal and bitch and moan about Rafael Cruz instead of, and you want to take shots at him. Why don't you take shots at Cory Booker? And how many times he puts his foot in his mouth? Oh, you won't do that, will you, Dave? All right, bro. Tú sabes, you're one of those, let me tell you, it boggles my mind, one of these guys that's so proud to be Boricua, but tú no hablas nada de español. You're disgraceful. But that's another issue, Davey. Okay? The bottom line is be a little more consistent because your bias is showing. It's been showing for a while. And I don't care because listen, people want to say, oh, Fernando, you're burning bridges. As if Uncle Dave's going to invite me ever to NJ Spotlight News. If he ever needs an interesting guest, a good-looking guest, yeah, bring me on, Uncle Dave. I bet you your traffic will go up instead of, I don't know, the 50 views or the 100 views that you get on some of your episodes on Chatbox or whatever. Some of that show that just puts everybody to sleep because it's so goddamn boring. But again, Dave, you have to have a little more integrity. You don't show it when you're not consistent in your outrage about senators. Be outraged about Cory Booker and some of the nonsense he peddles. If you're going to go after Rafael Cruz, go after Cory Booker. Because you know what? You want to talk about someone making an ass of himself? Yeah, it's the junior United States Senator. But you won't do that because, again, that requires you, Papa, to have a little integrity. Tú no lo tienes. Everybody knows it. Tú no tienes eso. Tú no tienes muchas cosas anyway. Pero integrity, eso no lo tiene. And everybody knows it. And again, folks, it's why when we talk about, bad journalism and enabling clowns, that's what NJ Spotlight does when they enable clowns like Uncle Dave. Oye, pobrecito, un payaso todo día. Dave, you don't know what that means. You can look it up on Google Translate. But of course, when we talk about bad journalism, of course, we have to talk about Insider NJ. Another winner this week. And folks, hey, it's been a few weeks, actually a few months since he's been in my crosshairs, but I got to go after, who, Sleepy Al. Yes, Al Steinberg, who sometimes, likes to virtue signal here, talking about reproductive choice supersedes inflation as a voting issue. Again, folks, you don't have to, I'm not going to read this to you. You can read this column. And again, when you look at it, if you ever need a cure for insomnia, just take Alan Steinberg's columns, right? And just be like this. And then eventually, you'll be like, oh, damn. Wait a second. Oh, I'm still on the first page. That's what Alan Steinberg is good at. He's good at putting you to sleep and also virtue signaling, right? No, Al, here's the truth. You want to be all virtuous here about reproductive rights? That's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But you're not entitled to your own facts. Okay? The idea of you writing here, this was totally rich here. Talking about, gas prices going down. Again, Al, why are you bragging about something that shouldn't have happened to begin with? But again, that's how myopic and short-sighted Alan Steinberg is. He wants to tell you, X amount of consecutive weeks that gas has gone down. The longest streak since 2005. Gas prices have never been this high, Al. But again, Sleepy Al won't do that. He'd rather virtue signal and demonize and talk about, oh my God, democracy's in peril. Democracy's in trouble. No, it's not, Al. It isn't. You want to believe it is. Okay? You want to believe that democracy somehow is in this fragile state or it's on life support. No, it's not. Folks, there's a lot of things that Sleepy Al likes to preach. That's probably the biggest one, aside from everything else, that involves virtue signaling. But this is really, really funny. Again, and certainly the Tom Malinowski, Tom Kean Jr. race is a very interesting one. I would argue it's probably going to be the closest race of any House election in New Jersey this year. Hopefully, Tom Kean Jr. can win that seat. Hopefully, the other Republicans in Central and South Jersey can flip some seats. As I mentioned before, here in Hudson County, Robin Ennis Jr., sure win to win in November. Up in Bergen County, Josh Gottheimer, another sure win to win in November. Mikey Sherrill, tragically, in that area of Essex County, she's due to win most likely, and probably almost certainly. Same thing with Bill Pascrell. But there are some House races where Republicans can be smart and focus on the issues. And I get it that Al wants to focus on reproductive rights, and I get it. What happened in the 19th Congressional District in New York is maybe going to start a fire. Folks, again, at the end of the day, it's kitchen table issues. Okay? It's kitchen table issues that matter to people. Gas is still high. Okay? Grocery shopping is still expensive. Other things, inflation. It's funny how the president and the clown that he has as a secretary, the press secretary, of course, right? Because you can't virtue signal enough about who you want to put in that position. But I thought the president said that we weren't living in inflation or under inflation, when we all know that 2 consecutive periods of zero economic growth is considered inflation. But then you have to pressure Democrats in both the House and Senate to pass this over-encompassing, overreaching piece of legislation, which does nothing to reduce inflation and just makes things more expensive. Really? Make a decision. Either we're living in inflation or we're not. But again, folks, that's not something that Sleepy Al won't talk about. He'd rather virtue signal, about Tom Kean and whether or not he's part of this cult. No, he's not. He's very much like his dad, a pretty honorable man. Okay, I was a young child. I don't really remember Tom Kean as governor, but from what I've read, he was an exceptional public servant. And it's interesting about, Sleepy Al to talk about denigrating other people. And I get it, if you do your homework on Sleepy Al, this is a guy that worked at the EPA, okay, during the George W. Bush administration. How come you never see Sleepy Al write one column about Christy Whitman, a despicable woman who sent men and women to their death in the days after 9/11 at Ground Zero, when that woman knew that the air at Ground Zero was toxic and it was going to kill people? No, Christy Whitman, not a peep from Sleepy Al during all these years about virtue signaling. You want to go after Republicans? Why don't you go after her? Oh, that's right. That requires you to have integrity, Al, and you don't have any. Again, just like you're clueless about your sports teams, thinking your Mets are going to win anytime soon, that your Nets are going to win anytime soon. Give me a break. They're not going to do anything. Okay? But the idea that you want to pick and choose when to be virtuous, why aren't you writing columns, right? Since you've come out in support of Liz Cheney, for example, that clown who's on her way out and over there, thank goodness. Why don't you write about her dad that sent thousands of men and women to their deaths, and some are permanently disfigured and maimed for the rest of their lives by lying us into a war in 2003. Why don't you talk about Liz Cheney's dad doing that? Why don't you do that? Why don't you, again, go back and denigrate Christy Whitman? When Insider NJ decides to publish articles, start putting her on a pedestal because she's trying to lead this new political revolution with Andrew Yang. Why don't you write about Christy Whitman and how she murdered people, Al? She murdered people. She sent people to their deaths at Ground Zero. I know firemen and police officers and their families that still have not recovered from that. But again, it would take you, Alan Steinberg, having integrity, that 4-syllable word that's so foreign to you because you don't have any when you write. You can write garbage columns like this. And again, if you need a cure to insomnia, folks, read Alan Steinberg's columns. They'll cure your insomnia. It knocks me out within 30 seconds. I can't even get past the first page without dozing off because of Alan Steinberg. Do better, Al. You're a 90-something-year-old man. You're almost 100, and you're still virtue signaling like this? Okay? I don't know if it's just you cognitively declining. I don't know if it's just early onset of dementia. I don't know what it is. It's sad because I used to call you a friend and someone I used to respect because at least you were somewhat fair. You've lost all integrity. You've lost all fairness, bro. You lean as far left as anybody. And the idea that you want to masquerade as, oh, well, you know what? I'm not a Republican anymore. That's fine. I don't think you ever really were. I think you masqueraded as one to get a job, whether it be the EPA or wherever else. That's fine. That's your business. You're living on a couple of pensions. God bless you. But Al, to come online with articles like this that are blatantly misleading, or you want to cherry pick when you want to be outraged, again, shows the garbage journalism that you practice. And mind you, he doesn't text me anymore. He doesn't blow up my phone. Oh, my column just published here. You know why? Because he knows I'm going to roast him like a Thanksgiving turkey. Alan, you lost your way. And it's a shame, bro, because it was a time when I respected you as a journalist. Those days are over because you've gone from writing respectably to now practicing garbage journalism on a weekly basis. Again, if there's anything wrong that I've said or inaccurate, come on this show. Grow a pair, come on this show and challenge me on what I get wrong. But here's a newsflash for you folks. He won't do that. Again, it requires integrity. And we all know that when it comes to lacking integrity, it's a prerequisite to work at Insider NJ, except Fred Snowflake. I love Fred Snowflake. He's a good guy. And I love his columns. But he's surrounded by clowns, and we see that every single week, whether it's him, whether it's Twinkle Toes, right, Maxie Olivier, or little JJ Lassiter, or others, take your pick. But Al, you're lacking integrity, and your bias is showing. Just like David Cruz, again, your bias is now blatant. You wear it on your sleeves. At least own it. At least say, hey, I'm a biased propagandist, because you're not a journalist anymore, Alan. You've become a full-blown propagandist. You need to own that. But it seems like you never will. Of course, when we talk about that, hey, it's always the same old garbage journalism and bad journalism you've come to rely on when it comes to Insider NJ. And folks, that's our show for this week. Once again, I want to thank the distinguished president of the National Organization for Women, Anjali Mehrotra. Great guest here tonight. Very lively conversation. If you've just catching us now, make sure that you share the episode. Again, sharing is caring, ladies and gentlemen, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, also on all social media platforms, on also True Social. Again, I just joined it right now, actually this weekend. So make sure you share it there. Also, folks, make sure you always check out all of the episodes at Jersey First's website, www.jerseyfirst.org/Real Talk with Fernando Uribe. Once again, that's Jersey First. That's the number 1, st.org/Real Talk with Fernando Uribe. Make sure, of course, you check out all the great episodes by the Nader Narrative, by Elizabeth Nader, also on Jersey First, and all the great programming associated with Jersey First. Make sure you like them on Facebook. And, of course, make sure you follow them on both Instagram and Twitter. Folks, make sure you check out my own Instagram and Twitter at the Fernando Zone. Certainly a lot of content every day there. I love to entertain you all with some pithy observations about today's political climate. Make sure you do that. Also, make sure you like me on Facebook, Real Talk with Fernando, and make sure you also follow me on Facebook. I'm the very photogenic, handsome man with the Biden Sucks t-shirt. You can't miss me. I'm actually wearing some really, really cool glasses as well. So make sure you follow me there on Facebook. And always remember, ladies and gentlemen, if it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid, it's always Real Talk right here with Jersey First TV. A special programming note, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your week and enjoy Labor Day weekend. We will not be broadcasting next Monday. I'll be in Vegas, a very largely overdue vacation for me. I work very hard on this show, so I deserve a little bit of a break. I'll be in Vegas, so enjoy your Labor Day weekend. Always remember, ladies and gentlemen, yes, I am New Jersey's premier award-winning journalist, top 100 Latino via the Latino Spirit online magazine. And you always know when the broadcast is live, ahora llega el superestrella. That's right. It's me, Fernando Uribe, wishing you all a very happy Labor Day weekend. Please party responsibly. I'll see you in 2 weeks, folks, in September, as we bring you the latest edition of Real Talk right here with Jersey First TV. As always, thank you so much for watching. And folks, Top Guy out.